Thank you for joining Cancer Support Community Atlanta for this program. Please visit our website, cscatlanta.org, for a complete list of live and recorded events. We invite you to sign up for our newsletter to stay connected to all future programs.
All right, here we go. So good to see familiar faces. Welcome to everybody who hasn't met one or the other of us before. So when we were asked to create this menu and this meal, we started thinking about sort of balance. Truth be told, we knew there was going to be turkey, but personally, if I'm being real honest, turkey is not the thing that really gets me excited about Thanksgiving. It's all of the sides. And we thought about it like a dietitian would from a color standpoint. I was like, we need a green thing, and we need an orange thing, and then we need, something else. We'll figure it out. So what we've got for you today, you've got the recipes all in front of you. We're not going to demo everything. Some of it we've made in advance, and we'll just talk through some tips for those recipes. But we've got turkey, of course, turkey breast. And then we've got the sesame miso acorn squash. Then we've got whole roasted cauliflower with an herb pistachio relish. Also threw in some pomegranate seeds. That's not on the recipe, but it was going to come down to whether or not I saw pomegranates in the store or not, and I did. So we're adding those today. That's our turkey. That's our showpiece. And then coconut milk creamed greens. And then for dessert, an olive oil cake with cranberry relish and whipped cream. So, anything else you want to say before we start going through the recipes? Let's do it. Okay. So we'll start talking about the sesame miso acorn squash. I've been on a bit of a campaign this squash season, talking about other squashes in addition to butternut squash. I feel like butternut squash is like the it girl that's sort of taking all the is popular for everybody, but I like to sort of experiment and show people other types of squash. So we talked about delicata squash and how it's smaller and a little bit easier to chop. Today we've used acorn squash, and I'll go ahead and pop the lid off of this so you can see what we're working with. But acorn squash is that sort of green, round, giant acorn shaped, I'll just take it entirely off, squash. And I'm realizing I'm off camera cue, but I'm going to move this pan over. Cool. So this is another squash that you can work with without peeling it, which is really nice. Butternut squash really requires it to be peeled. So the skin is a little bit tougher than delicata squash. It's not quite so delicate, but still totally edible, totally tasty. It's got a nice, naturally very sweet flavor. And so what we did with this squash today was cut it. And when you're cutting a big acorn squash, like most round things, it's nice to get a flat surface first. And because I knew we wanted to do half rings, we sort of cut the little tail end or the stem end off so you get a flat surface, and then go all the way through stem to tip to make two halves. Then you can scoop out those seeds and slice them up into whatever size you want. The marinade is literally just mixing all of that stuff together. So the molasses, soy sauce, maple syrup, miso, orange juice, lemon juice, zest, like mixed all of those together. And then to get the sesame seeds on it, you could go a lot of different ways. And I experimented throughout the course of this because I had 5 squash to play with. I experimented a little bit with how to get those seeds on there. So the first thing I started doing was dipping the squash in the marinade, in a bowl of the marinade, and then pressing one side of the squash into the seeds. And that worked really beautifully. And you'll see some of these are like perfectly evenly coated with seeds. And that would probably work fine for 1 squash, but with 5 squash, eventually all of my seeds got saturated in marinade and they didn't want to stick anymore. So in the end, I ended up just dumping the rest of my seeds into my marinade and sort of tossing it all up. So that's another method to do it. You could also just sort of pour the marinade over it. All the marinade that was left after I had it panned up, I just poured over everything. Then it's going to go into a real hot oven. You do want to make sure that you cover this for the first part of cooking because that marinade is sticky and sweet, and it's going to reduce down, and it'll burn if you don't cover it for the first part of cooking. So the covering it with foil is important, and then you'll cook it for about 30 minutes. Take that foil off, and it says 20 to, that's a weird way to write it. It should say 15 to 20. It says 20 to 15 minutes. I would definitely check it around 15 minutes because what's nice is that marinade's going to reduce into this like syrupy, delicious goodness. And if you can, as you're serving it, sort of, if it's still liquidy enough to pour back over everything, that's the sweet spot. If you cook it too far, it won't be bad. It'll just sort of seize into glue.
And I was a dishwasher, so I'll warn you, please line your pans with foil.
This is
really
definitely a time.
That delicious gooiness will burn and it's really
become
hard to
glue.
get off your sheet pan. So if you line your sheet pan with foil, make sure it's really tight and secure so that sugary syrup won't get
Right.
into your sheet pan and burn.
Right. So I would, if your oven cooks hot, I would check it on the earlier side so that your marinade that's still in that pan is still kind of viscous and syrupy, which is great. And then you can just sort of pour it over everything else. And that's that. So again, however, you could even just marinate all the squash and sprinkle all your seeds on top. You can play with it however you want. Whatever's easiest, whatever feels like the presentation you want. So that's the squash.
Yeah, and that works well with, I think you said,
Any kind of squash. It would work with butternut squash, kabocha squash. Last week or the week before, sometime, I worked with a honey nut squash, which is like the little baby butternut squash, and is a little bit sweeter, I find, than even butternut squash, and is a little easier on your knife chopping arm. It's just not such a beast to get into. So yeah, any kind of squash. I mean, it would work. This marinade would work with any of your Thanksgiving orange things. If you wanted to slice sweet potatoes into rounds, delicious. Any of your sweet orange winter squash, this would be awesome.
I suggest pouring on ice cream.
Oh, right, yeah. Once it's reduced and come out of the oven, that was a good option
you guys
too.
are going to like that. It's really tasty.
All right, so that is our other questions about, yeah. Hubbard squash, absolutely, yeah. However, you can just sort of chop it into relatively even chunks or pieces.
What's nice about the acorn squash and a few other squash, you don't have to peel it. You know, the butternut squash you would have to peel, so that's an extra step. You can't really eat the skin; it's too fibrous. But those skins are a little more tender, so it saves you less work in the kitchen.
You had a question?
Yes, how many servings does this?
This would serve, I guess it depends on how hungry you are. So we estimated all of these squash, they were mostly medium sized. You can get about 4 good slices out of. And so if I was eating this just at home with not a lot of other things, like maybe 1 full slice would feel right for me. For today, I estimated a half a ring. So like a slice this wide. So the recipe calls for 2 squash. I would say you could get 8 servings out of this probably.
Especially if you have a lot of the food.
And yeah, if you want to scale it down and do 1 squash, you just half everything.
Let me ask you.
Yeah.
You used like spaghetti squash, which is hard to cut.
Mm-hmm.
That butternut squash is hard to cut.
Uh-huh.
Is this easier to cut? Or what?
It's easier than those, but if you are struggling to cut those big ones, give delicata squash a try. It's about yay big.
So that's not.
This is acorn squash. Yeah. And again, like on the scale of how hard, not as hard as butternut squash, harder than delicata squash, this is to cut. But the delicata squash is yellow with little green and white striations on it. It's about yay big. If you've seen those, that's your one. Don't have to peel it. The flesh into the area of the cavity in the middle is only about this big. So your rings are going to be yay big. They're only going to be about that thick. So it just makes it much easier to cut through. And it's deliciously sweet. It doesn't take as long to roast. You can tell I'm a fan of delicata squash. Any other questions about squash? All right, chef, talk about some greens for us.
Greens. So we did a mixture. We bought kale, chard, and collards. This dish is super simple. What I did, I started with some roasted garlic, some diced onion. I sweat that down. Then we took the liberty of chopping all the stems first. Let me get on the mic. We took the liberty of chopping all the stems first and sweating those ahead of time. So everything will cook a little more evenly. So if you start with your garlic, your onions, your oil, right? Everything's measured out. Add your stems to that and let that sweat for 5-10 minutes. And then I started adding my greens. So I use different greens. So I put my collards in first because they're hearty, right? I sweat those out, and then I went with my chard and then my kale. I finished with the kale. The one thing I will note, if you're using a tall pot, unless you've got a nice wide pot, you may have to add a little bit of water just to help wilt some of the greens, because you're not going to fit all those greens in here at one time, especially with this recipe size. So if you're downscaling,
the size that you guys have is going to be easier. You were doing 8 pounds. I think the recipe calls for 2 pounds.
fair, yeah.
So 2 pounds, a regular standard bunch of kale is about 1 pound. I measured them at the store just to make sure.
Yeah.
So that recipe calls for 2 bunches of kale. And again, depends on if you're doing sort of more side-eye. Greens cook down a ton, as you know, if you've ever cooked dark green leafies.
This is 8 pounds.
Yeah, that's 8 pounds, and it's about that high.
Yeah, so it will cook down a lot. But the beauty of it is once you cook it down, you add your coconut milk, right? You let that coconut milk simmer. If you guys remember, I did a broccoli soup with coconut milk.
Yeah.
And it didn't taste like coconut milk, right? Here we go, right? Back at it again, coconut milk again. It's really good. It's really, really good. It has just a nice amount of fat and everything just tastes beautiful. I finished with salt, pepper, and a little bit of nutmeg, like a cream spinach type deal. And that's it. Was breadcrumbs on top. I toasted some breadcrumbs ahead of time. So I just like a little bit of crunch on here. So what I would do is just pour my hot greens into my bowl, add my toasted breadcrumbs. This is panko. So I took panko and olive oil, mixed it together. I toasted it on the stovetop, or you can do it in the oven in a sheet pan, 350, 10 minutes. You're probably good to go. It won't take long. Okay, I didn't put anything on these. Feel free to throw some herbs in there if you want or something like that. You can do that to mix it up. Again, you can use all collards, you can use all kale, you can use all chard, you can mix it up. It doesn't matter. So the beauty of it is it's so simple. Onions, garlic, a little bit of oil, your greens, your coconut milk, breadcrumbs on top. Or not breadcrumbs. If you don't want breadcrumbs, don't put the breadcrumbs. I'm a fan of breadcrumbs. Right? And that's it. Salt, pepper, nutmeg. You're good to go. Any questions on the cream greens? Yes.
Why are you using the coconut milk instead of regular, like chicken broth or bone broth?
Well, we wanted something creamy, right? We knew that some of the folks here are can't have dairy, so I chose coconut milk. I like to choose things. I like to work with coconut milk. I like the way it feels in the mouth. I don't drink a lot of milk at home or dairy, so I like to show people that I think coconut milk, people get a little afraid of it because they think it's going to taste like coconut milk, right? But it really doesn't when you're cooking with greens and soups and things like that. So that's my take on coconut milk.
But if you want to braise greens in broth, in bone broth, or in veggie stock or whatever, the sort of principle of braised greens works the same, right? So whatever onion or garlic or aromatics that you're starting with, you want to get those cooked in a little bit of olive oil or whatever fat you're using. Throw in your greens a handful at a time to get them sort of wilted down, and then add whatever liquid you're using. It could be water if you want.
And it could be heavy cream if you want.
Right? You can. It just sort of. It's incredibly adaptable. But that method of braising greens works really, really well. Put a lid on it, let it simmer until your liquid has reduced down, whatever liquid you're using, and it's super versatile.
Yeah, the coconut milk's been simmering here for a while too. So if you go back to the other method of heavy cream or something like it's eventually going to get so thick or it's going to break or something like that. So this can hang out on your stovetop and just it's hands off. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to baby it. Once you get everything in there, you're done. You're moving on to your next thing that you're making.
So when I go to the store, I see like this whole shelf of cream or milk, coconut. I was like, what?
Oh, of all the types of milk, we're at peak milk.
It's like cream too. So do you have to
Sure.
like, change something up if you get?
So if you follow that recipe with coconut milk, you're going to be fine. I mean, there's different levels of coconut milk, like full fat. There's different fat.
Yeah, I'm just like, huh?
I mixed them up as well.
Because
So
it's what we had.
that's
We had a
what we
can
had.
in here. I bought another can. It's what we had.
Yeah.
We put them together. It really comes down to what amount of richness you're sort of looking for, right? If you want something to be really sort of, rich, I guess is the word I'm still looking for, right? Like really rich and filling, then, coconut milk, heavy cream, something like that is going to be a little bit more, rich and indulgent. If you're looking for something that you just want, you got these greens and you just want to braise them, again, water, broth, you can totally take it away from creamy. We were sort of thinking of an indulgent feast here today. Mm-hmm. Right, exactly. But, doing it in a different way without using the dairy today. There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got several good vegan options and things that can be easily veganized today.
Any other
Which reminds me,
questions?
I will leave one of our cauliflowers without yogurt on the bottom.
Panko's a breadcrumb. Just a crunchier breadcrumb. It holds up well.
So it's not
moisture.
so sandy. You know how sort of seasoned Italian breadcrumbs are very fine, right?
Saturated.
And so they just don't give that as much of a crisp coating on the outside of something. They don't have as much of a crunch to them. Whereas this is just a
pass it around.
chunkier. And again, yeah, you can get them at whatever grocery store.
That's a Publix brand.
I think officially Japanese.
Yeah, definitely
Style
Japanese.
breadcrumb.
They come in a foil bag too. That's the one I buy. That's cool. It works. Yeah, they're easy to toast, and they don't get saturated and gooky like.
Yeah, they don't
breadcrumbs.
clump up as
Yeah.
much, which is nice. All right.
All right.
Other questions about greens? All right, let's get into some cauliflower. Okay, so this is kind of when Mike and I don't know where I saw this or where I got the idea, but I saw whole roasted cauliflower, and then Mike and I just started spitballing ideas back and forth as we developed this recipe. Let's see if we can make room right here. Yep. And so we were like, what do we want this to have on it? And so we just kept throwing more and more things at it. And again, incredibly versatile. But in playing around with whole roasted cauliflower, I learned a couple things along the way. So if you look up recipes for whole roasted cauliflower, there are two camps. One camp says parboil the entire head of cauliflower first, otherwise it's not going to cook all the way through. And the other camp says you don't have to bother doing that. And because I hadn't done this a lot, I was like, we need to test both methods so that I can go in here and confidently tell people which way to do it. And I was hoping that you wouldn't have to parboil, because that's just easier not to have to, right? And I was real happy to find out that the one that I did not parboil got crispier and more browned on the outside, which when I'm cooking cauliflower, that is the whole entire goal, right? Like the more brown and crispiness and then tender on the inside, that's what I get excited about. So you do not need to parboil the cauliflower, but you should put a pan of water in the oven with your cauliflower, and that's just going to help make a steamier environment and get it all the way through. The other thing I would recommend is we got real fancy here. So what we did on the outside is olive oil, turmeric, ground coriander, which you guys can pass that around if you're not familiar with coriander. It's got a real floral scent to it. Cumin seeds, because I really like the crunch of cumin seeds, but if you had already ground cumin, you could use already ground cumin. And salt. And then, so that's what we coated on the outside of these guys. And, oh yeah, it's falling apart. So to make sure that all of that good flavoring sort of went all the way through, I made my little marinade oil situation, put it in a measuring cup, and poured it on the inside upside down. The other thing I did to get these prepped up was I cut off the leaves, and there's nothing wrong with the leaves. You can absolutely eat the leaves. I just wanted to get access to these holes in here, right? I wanted to be able to get all that good stuff all down in there. You could roast the leaves if you wanted to. And then I cut all the cores off so they would be flat, so they would stand up straight. So that is what I did to get those guys prepped up. And then they just went into an oven. Again, this is 6 cauliflower. The other day I roasted 2. It's in the ovens I've used so far, it's taking about an hour. But again, if you have a cauliflower this size, it might take you 45 minutes, this little guy, versus this big one over here, going to take you the whole hour. Really what you're looking for to make sure it's all the way done is if you flip it over and stick a paring knife in that core, you want it to just feel nice and tender, the way you like, or as tender as you like to eat your cauliflower, because this is your cauliflower, and you want it to be the way you like it. Okay, so then the other thing that we decided to put on top, I'm calling it a relish. I realized after the fact that we put the word relish in 2 different recipes today, but I was like, I don't really know what else to call it. It's not quite pesto. It's chunky. It's not quite salsa. So that's what we're calling it today. All right, so we've got parsley, and again, I'm doing 6 heads of cauliflower, so we're going to be generous with the amounts here. You've got the recipe over there for if you were working with just 1 head of cauliflower. And I've pre-chopped some other parsley, but I'm going to give all of this sort of a rough chop. If you wanted to throw all of this into, I'm not too worried about a lot of the stems because I'm going to keep chopping it down and chopping it down. If you wanted to throw this in a food processor, I suppose you could, but I was not really wanting it to turn into like a full, smooth, homogeneous pesto. I wanted it to be kind of chunky. This is mint. I'm going to give it, I don't want long ribbons, so I'm going to give it a cut all the way through. Roll them all up. Again, I'm just giving everything a real rough chop to start, because then I'm going to kind of put it all back together and keep chopping. Red onion. I suppose I can talk about onion. I feel like a broken record for those of you who have been here every time, but we're going to talk about chopping onions. All right, so first thing you want to do with round vegetables is get yourself a flat surface. Then we're going to cut this little end off. This onion, you know how some grocery stores kind of pre-peel the onions a little bit for you, so this one doesn't have as much layer on the outside, but you want to get that outside papery layer off, but I like to leave it intact because it just gives me a little bit extra stability and a handle, right? And then I'm going to take my knife and sort of rainbow along. It almost gives you guidelines on the onion, right? So we're going to go along the outside of it. All right. Some folks like to give it a cross all the way through. I feel like that's a little scary if your knife's not super, super sharp. And I also just find it's not always necessary to get the amount of dice that I'm looking for. All right, I don't want a ton of onion, but we do have a lot of cauliflower here. So I'm going to just do half an onion for the amount we've got here. And then once you get it diced up like that, You can further mince down as much as you want or need to. And because I want some of the liquid of this relish to come from this oniony flavor, I'm going to give it a little bit of salt right now. I'm going to go kind of easy on the salt because the pistachios that I bought happen to have been salted.
Any nut allergies? Awesome.
Good question. All right, so now I'm going to take the rest of my herbs here, and I'm just going to sort of keep chopping it all together. Again, for one head of cauliflower, you're not going to be dealing with quite this much volume. I'm going to zest my orange onto this, and then I'm going to hand the orange back to you because you need juice, right?
You can zest it.
Thanks.
Microplane. You guys remember? We always use a microplane.
Best
Zest.
zesting tool in
Yes.
town.
With those herbs, if you're buying herbs in the store, if you have a room in your kitchen, I would recommend getting maybe the whole potted plant herbs
Yeah,
instead of
get
the
a lot
little
more out of
plastic
it.
ones that are, especially with herbs that people don't buy a lot of, like mint. Just get a mint plant. Just keep it watered once in a while. Put it by your window. It'll last a long time. If you buy mint in a little plastic packaging, one, it's expensive. Two, it's not always the best quality. Sometimes you'll find you get it home and it's already rotten or spoiled.
So I've seen like maybe a couple different kinds of parsley. I guess was that just a preference?
Yeah, it was because when I tested the recipe earlier in the week, the store only had curly parsley,
Okay.
and so that's what I bought. And then when I shopped for this yesterday, they had flat leaf parsley, which is what I tend to buy more of. I don't know why, kind of a personal preference. Texturally, and I just wanted to use up what I had. So, again, you can play around with the herbs in this and go a lot of different directions. I'm going to get this sort of incorporated in here. But this is getting to the point that it's the texture that I'm looking for.
Well, that's what we were talking about earlier with this recipe. You know, just like a lot of things that we make here, you can use whatever you want. You don't like parsley, don't do
Yes.
parsley. You don't like mint, don't add mint. Add dill, add tarragon.
Oh, yeah, all of those things would be
All those things are great.
awesome.
Thyme.
How about time?
So thyme I would add in combination with something else. This volume of thyme is going to be well, first of all,
I would add the thyme beforehand. Actually.
getting the thyme off of all of those woody little stems it would be a tedious process. But so if you think about your herbs that are fresh and green and leafy and tend to be more annuals, mint doesn't count because mint comes back every year, is a perennial. But botanically and working in the garden, your parsley, your cilantro, your basil. In general, in recipes, you can handle a lot more volume of those, whereas your rosemary, thyme, oregano, sage, that volume of leaves is just going to be overpowering. They tend to have a really strong flavor, and so they work well in combination of other things.
They would probably work well beforehand when you're going in the oven. They handle well with heat, like in the oven. So
That's true.
if you want to use rosemary, thyme, or sage, you could do it ahead of time while the cauliflower is raw, and then throw it in the oven and roast it at that point.
So I'm going to do the sort of same thing. I'm just going to keep on chopping up some of I pre-chopped these pistachios a little bit, but I just want to sort of get everything kind of mixed in here together.
Buford Farmers Market has fabulous herbs.
Mhm.
Nice. I bought a mint plant recently. Over the summer, you tend to see basil plants in the grocery store, even your Kroger's and Publix's. The cow farmer's market sells bigger bunches of herbs, so if you need a lot, I find their value if you live in the Decatur area, or a Buford Highway Farmers Market probably does the same. All right, so really we're just going to get all this piled together. And then because we've got raw onion, we made a really fun mess over here. Because we've got raw onion, I like to put some sort of acid in that. So that, for this recipe, could be lemon juice, could be orange juice. It's going to be sherry vinegar today.
I really wanted olives in this, but
He did want olives in this. How many of you in here, show of hands, love olives? How many of you absolutely hate olives? Like, don't want to touch them?
Boom.
How many people are just like meh on olives? Okay, right. So
went over really well today.
It would have gone over well today. So I love olives.
Yeah.
I love olives. But when I texted a group of friends when I first was testing this recipe and said, I have to cook 2 heads of cauliflower tonight. Who wants to come over and eat cauliflower? I had one friend who said, I'll come eat cauliflower. I had several friends who wanted to come. And one friend who was able to come. And I was sort of hemming and hawing because I said, olives are polarizing, right? People love them or they really don't like them. And so that friend, I said, how do you feel about olives? And she was like, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going to make you eat olives. You came over to help me. I really like those buttery green Castelvetrano, I think is how you say it. It's probably what I would have used here, but you could use whatever you like. A Kalamata would be fine. Here's the spoons. Let's see if this is where we want it to be. Yes, however, the last thing that I want to do with this is when I put it on my cauliflower, I want it to be a little bit more fluid, but I don't want to add more vinegar. I feel like it's got the right amount of vinegar. So I'm going to splash a little bit of water in here just to get it more flowy and fluid.
How far in advance can you make the roast?
I would...
Can I make it the night before?
You could make it the night before. I wouldn't go too far past that. There we go. So you can kind of... So now it's going to sort of not just sit in a mountain on top of our cauliflower. Chef, would you get the pomegranate seeds?
Yes.
So pomegranates are highly seasonal, as you know. They're also kind of fussy. But the friend that I had over the other night said that she found pomegranate seeds, opening a pomegranate to just be really meditative. We've talked before about people that like chopping vegetables and find it meditative, and people that find chopping vegetables to be a chore. So pomegranates are kind of like that. Have you guys ever opened up a pomegranate and seeded it yourself before? It takes some time.
Kind of messy.
It's kind of messy. I do find, because it'll kind of spatter and the juice will stain. I do find if you want to cut down on that spatter and stain, that if you do it in a big mixing bowl of water, that the seeds will sort of sink down and the pithy material tends to be on the top. And that works really well. So, cauliflower, pomegranate seeds aren't officially in this recipe, but I do like the balance of the crunch and the onion. If you didn't want to deal with pomegranate seeds or they weren't in season, Golden raisins would probably be really nice here, or even regular raisins would have a nice color contrast.
Just again, too, this relish can go with other things. It doesn't have to be
For sure.
cauliflower. You know, it could be another vegetable. I mean, even meat. When I was working in restaurants, we would make something similar to that and serve it with lamb on the lamb.
Yes.
It had olives in it, though. I'm just saying.
Who raised their hand and said they weren't that into olives? I'm here for you. I've got your back. I've got your back. I'm not thrusting things upon you.
Yeah.
I love olives. He did. And I thought maybe incorporated in
Olives
this.
are coming 2024.
It could be possible.
We're going to do, yeah.
Okay, so to make this a really sort of beautiful center of the plate sort of dinner party presentation, and I've got a couple of extra over here. I'm going to probably do 3 here, and then we'll do some without the yogurt. A smear of yogurt on the plate just makes it almost like a whole, balanced, creamy. I mean, honestly, I ate my friend and I that came over, like, this was dinner. It felt like a complete meal with the yogurt, the relish, the cauliflower, the nuts in there, all complete. So this is just plain Greek yogurt. I'm gonna give it a smear on this platter. And as we serve it, we'll get a scoop of it up. And then when the liquid from that sort of dribbles down in there and seasons it, we talked about, do we need to do some, as we were writing this recipe, do we want to do something with the yogurt? Do we want it to be, you could put citrus zest in it. You could grate garlic into it. You could do whatever you want with it. Zest, yeah. All right. So we're going to take our cauliflower heads. Thank you. All right. And then we're just going to get all of that all in there.
So when I said this is our turkey, that's
This
kind
is
of what I
our
meant,
turkey.
'cause it's the center of the plate thing, it looks so nice at the table. Very pretty, like your turkey does in the middle of your table.
So what would that be like if you smoked the cauliflower on a big green egg?
Ooh, I love this idea.
Smoked cauliflower is awesome.
That
Yeah.
sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I'm very into it. I don't know what that would be like, but I would like to know. Right, can you get a big green, can
Yes,
we get
please.
a sponsorship maybe?
They'll donate one, right? And in the summer we can do demos outside.
All right.
Or spring, yeah.
Oh, I'm so excited about that.
That looks great. Yeah.
First marinate you made, that looks like Indian style, all cumin and everything.
The cumin and coriander.
And if you add yogurt or something, it tastes like that's the way sometimes I make.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah, we talked about that. Yeah.
It's like every day I don't make it because then you have to put more oil and everything.
Yeah.
But once in a while, that's the way you make it. I used to make it like pressure cooker also you can keep it, but then you have to put more oil.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely got some, all the spices are Southeast Asian and Indian vibe. Also has kind of Persian, kind of.
And that's why we went with the plain yogurt. I don't think it really needed anything because you've already done so much.
It
and you have
didn't at
so
all.
many flavors going on.
All right, so we'll put this one in here. We'll put 2 on here, and then we'll leave
Yeah, one.
1 over there with them.
Disagree.
Just plain Greek
Plain
yogurt.
Greek, yeah. It can hold up. It's got a lot of nice acid in it, and it's thicker.
Dietitian Savannah, what do you think about the cauliflower? I love cauliflower. It's great fiber, lots of vitamin C in it. Yeah, I love it.
Have you ever cooked a whole head of cauliflower in the microwave?
No, but I bet you could.
You can't.
You can.
You're
Yeah.
probably not going to get the browning on the
Yeah.
outside. Yeah,
Right.
it would just
Right,
be
right.
You can cook it in 10 or 12 minutes.
Nice.
nice. Get all of this
And
juice.
well, I mean, to your point, that could be one way to. We were talking about blanching them ahead of time, and then roasting them. So if you wanted to do it in a microwave, for 5-10 minutes, and then go into the oven to get the browning. At that point, you probably have to turn your heat up in the oven because your cauliflower is nearly cooked, so you don't want to.
Right. Yeah, I did find. Okay, so that's a good point. I did find with the one that I had blanched, that it needed a little time under the broiler to get browned at the end. It did get browned eventually, but it needed a little bit more.
Those are nice.
They're going wild.
You wouldn't ever serve those broken up more to serving size.
You absolutely could.
Yeah.
From here,
Yeah.
you for sure could serve it, eighths, quartered, however you want to go from
You
there.
could cut them ahead of time and lay it on the yogurt, and then pour everything over top.
You could
That's-
slice them into sort of steaks. big
Chunks, wedges.
slices, so that they have that core intact. Is really nice as well. All right. Any other questions about cauliflower? All right, so to finish us out, I previewed this story for somebody else about the year, I don't know how many years ago it was when Chef Mike was making cranberry sauce at the hospital for Thanksgiving and was cooking it like many people do with their cranberry sauce. And I don't remember the conversation exactly, maybe you do. But I said something about how my grandmother made what she called cranberry relish and the cranberries weren't cooked. And he was like, what? He was real judgy about it.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm telling you, that's what my granny did. And it was a staple in our Thanksgivings. And she always had some in her freezer. And I gave him the recipe and he made it. And he's a full-on
Love it.
granny uncooked cranberry relish convert.
Yeah, I don't know if the patients are ready for it in the
No, I get it.
hospital.
I get it.
That's how I make
Okay, then.
Come on up.
Maybe
Yeah.
you and my granny read it from the same newspaper article.
Yeah, it is really good, guys, and I did fall in love with it because it is so easy as well. Because she mentioned I cook cranberry sauce at the hospital. We're cooking for 1,000 patients, so we're making a lot of cranberry sauce, and it takes a lot of time, stirring, cooking, this and that. What I like about this for home, it's so easy to make. Again, has a lot of good flavor, and it's simple. It's cranberries, pecans, apples, oranges, some orange zest, and some sugar. So that's 12 ounces of cranberries. That's, a cup of pecans, cup or two of sugar, 2 apples that I'm going to core and chop. We're going to go with 2 oranges and the zest that I took, and I zested the other orange. We are going to make it in a blender. I've made it in a food processor, which is pretty useful. I broke ours here. Well, I don't know. Maybe you broke it. Somebody broke the food processor. So we're going to use a blender, and that's fine. We're going to have to make it in probably 2 batches. If you've got a food processor, you can dump everything one time in the food processor, let it run to the consistency that you're looking for. I like it a little more chunky, but you do want to break these cranberries up a little bit. I guess you could do it with a knife if you were patient enough, but it's going to get pretty messy. So probably what I'm going to do first, since this is a blender, I'm going to go ahead and put my orange juice in the bottom. Okay. Just going to squeeze that. If you got a juicer, you can use that. Utilize all that great stuff. Then I'm going to add my cranberries. And then I'll finish everything in this bowl for you guys so you can see.
They were frozen,
They were
earlier.
Yeah. I guess you can.
Grind up the bag of cranberries, 1 ounce sugar.
Very simple. Yeah, I mean, you can go different routes. If you don't want the pecans in there, you can do that. Yeah. A meal grinder. Yeah. I bet
Meat
Granny
grinder.
did that.
Meat grinder.
Yeah.
I have an attachment for my KitchenAid.
That was easy. So I'm going to chop these apples real quick. I'm just going to start throwing everything in there. That went better than I thought it was going to go. All right, if you got an apple core, you can core your apple. I'm going to just go ahead and give it a rough chop. Any questions on this while I'm chopping away? Just going to rough chop. No. You guys know I'm lazy. I don't peel anything around. Carrots, no.
But also, from a waste standpoint, there's, no need to create waste. I was getting there next. From a dietitian standpoint, there's lots of good fiber and nutrients in the peels and skins of things. Now, certainly there's some stuff that's just too fibrous, like butternut squash we were talking about earlier. We're not, trying to make anything unpleasant to eat, just for the sake of the virtue of it.
That's right.
But, yeah. Lots of good fiber in that apple peel.
I think so. Okay.
Fly too close to the sun?
Yeah, I shouldn't have opened my mouth, right? We're going to make this work. I can add some water to this if I need to. This is where you go to commercial break.
I'm saying a cocktail. You just keep pulling.
Right, yeah. You want a bowl?
Maybe it's a gin.
And dump it out, flip it, yeah.
Ah, it's the pecans at the bottom. All right,
Order of operations.
that's right.
That's in the cake, although I did not use it, but it's optional in there. And I've made this cake a bazillion times, and I use Grand Marnier if I happen to have it in the liquor cabinet, and if I don't, then I just use orange juice. Rather than try to get budget approval from Lauren for a bottle of Grand Marnier for a tiny bit, I was like, yeah. I said, you know what? We're going to just use orange juice. If I had had it, I would have given it to you. I would have donated my quarter of a cup. Right, and then we've got the bottle sitting around. And I told him to use the Vitamix, so this is now all on me, you guys. He's over here struggling because I told him to use that instead of the Ninja.
Oh, that's okay.
So you can blame me.
I will.
It can be a little juicy because it's going on the cakes and we want it to kind of seep in. So while we're on it, let's talk about the cake. So this is olive oil cake. I cannot take any credit for this recipe. It's kind of a darling on the internet. It's internet famous. It's from a restaurant that I don't even think exists anymore in New York, an Italian restaurant called Maialino. But I've been making this for years and years and years. And I've played around. Sometimes I've chopped up rosemary and put it in there. Sometimes I put chocolate in there. I'll let you know. Yeah. So it's sort of a blank slate, kind of like pound cake, except if you've never had olive oil cake, it is almost like British pudding-like, right? It is very, it's very dense on the inside. It's very moist. It's very forgiving. You could probably eventually overcook it, but it'd be really hard. And yeah, the flavor of the olive oil is just a really nice palette. It's also an incredibly easy cake to make, right? If you're not super into baking, it's really forgiving. It's like a one bowl situation, hand mix it, doesn't require creaming butter and sugar together. You literally just, well, okay, I said one bowl, it's really two bowls. So you take all your dry ingredients, your flour, your sugar, your salt, baking powder, baking soda, put all that together. Then you take your liquid ingredients, your olive oil, milk, eggs, orange juice, and again, it says Grand Marnier. That's the original recipe from Maialino that called for Grand Marnier. And many, many times, if I don't have that, I would just double up the amount of orange juice so that you have that same amount of liquid. And the orange in here still ends up being quite subtle. It's not an overly orangey flavor, but it also, if you wanted to take it in a lemony direction, if you wanted to make it lime, that would work too. I'll pause again for you to. Yeah, any other kind of orange liqueur if you wanted to do that. Again, it's very much a blank slate. It doesn't even in the original recipe have vanilla in it. But if you wanted to add vanilla or play with other flavors, you can. So you could put butter instead of olive oil, but to me, the point of this cake is the olive oil flavor, right? Like, and it's going to change your texture a little bit, right? Structurally, the butter has more. It has some water in it that's going to steam, and that I can't tell you exactly what scientifically, food sciencey that's doing. But yeah, it just gives it a. This is not a fluffy cake, right? This is a really close crumb, very moist cake.
You guys, if you've been in my class, we've talked about making salad dressings all the time and the different oils and how I don't particularly use the really expensive olive oil for salad dressings because I don't want them to overpower. This is an example of where I would use a really good olive oil is in that cake.
Like this is extra virgin olive oil or just?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't have the bottle anymore, but okay. So when we were thinking about cranberry relish, we thought, oh gosh, that would be really fun if we put that with the cake. If we sort of made it part of our dessert showpiece. So just to. The tang of this, I think, is going to be a really nice complement.
Do you think you could add whole milk, nut milk rather than the whole milk for that recipe?
Absolutely, for sure.
Did you add the sugar to that cranberry?
I did.
He did, yes. I will tell you, my granny's recipe for this cranberry relish had 2 cups of sugar in it originally, which is a lot of sugar.
And again, if you had a food processor, everything can go in at one time. Just dump it all in, and you can control the coarseness of it. That's actually not bad for the cake.
No, it's really nice.
This radish, like how long before you make it? Just before cutting or?
No, in fact, if I wasn't showing it to you guys, I would want to do it a little bit earlier so that it could sort of, the liquid could kind of soak in. Okay, so I was playing with this rosemary earlier. This is just decoration. Again, I have added rosemary and minced it up and put it in the cake before, which was really nice to get them to go around in a circle. If you break them in half, then they play nice and you can kind of tuck them underneath, and you're taking a straight line and making it more of a curved line to go around your cake. This rosemary came out of my yard yesterday. Yeah. It does, it takes about an hour to bake it, but again, once you just do that, mix the dry, mix the wet, put it together, and hand mix, and again, just like with muffins, it can be a little lumpy. You want to just sort of mix it until it's just combined.
Looks like cornbread.
It does. You're right. We'll have enough cranberry relish that if people just want to have it with turkey, that's fine too. My grandmother, I cannot think of a time that I opened her freezer that there was not a Tupperware container of this in her freezer. All right. And then how about we whip cream one of these cakes and leave one undone? Although there is milk in the cake. Get a spatula instead. There is milk in the cake batter though. Okay. You're okay with that? Okay. Gotcha. This cream, because the cake is fairly sweet and the relish is sweet, I opted not to sweeten the cream. If you were just serving this cake with cream, ooh, we lost some. I will sometimes sweeten it. In the springtime, I like to, this is like a tradition in my household, we collect honeysuckles and soak them overnight in the heavy cream. And then make whipped cream and serve it with this cake. And the cake is just a delivery method to be able to eat cream that tastes like honeysuckles. And it is amazing. All right. So there we go. We did it.
We did it.
Thank you for joining Cancer Support Community Atlanta for this program. If you're interested in other live or recorded programs, please visit the online program tab of our website, cscatlanta.org, or follow us on Facebook. We'll be sharing additional information on upcoming programs.